afternoon, Spokane. Thanks for coming out. Looks like the Liberty Movement is alive and well and packing itself into the room. About a month ago, I stood for 10.5 hours on the Senate floor to defend your right to be left alone. Justice Brandeis said that the most cherished of rights by civilized people is the right to be left alone. I think if you were left alone, you might manage your forests a little bit better out here. I think if you were left to yourselves and left alone, you might be able to figure out what to do with the wolves. In fact, I can think of a good fundraiser, maybe a wolf hunting fundraiser. But Lord knows we'd probably have to wait a century to get the right permits to be able to shoot them. I understand over in Idaho, though, they're one step ahead of you. I think they took them off the endangered species. I have a bill that would give back endangered species to you. You decide what's endangered. Y'all count them up and decide what you want to do to protect species. I remember one time I went and heard a speech. I was about 18-year-old with Walter Williams. Anybody know who Walter Williams is? And he says, you know what? If you want to conserve something, sell it to somebody. Anybody know of a shortage of cows or chickens? When somebody owns something, they conserve it. They get more of it. When you own the timber, when you cut it down, you plant more. You conserve it. If you own the timber, my guess is you get rid of the brush beneath it so it isn't lost to fire because you lose the valuable resource. Right. But ownership breeds pride. But there's a great saying that comes from Friedman where he says that nobody spends somebody else's money as wisely as their own. And that's the truth. Do you think somebody in Washington knows anything about whether or not your local teachers are good? If you're a teacher, ask any teacher in Spokane, do you want Washington to decide what your curriculum is and how to teach your class, but also do you want Washington to determine whether you're a good teacher or not? They have no clue in Washington. If you've seen the way they behave, maybe you don't want them involved with your curriculum. What's the new website they're all on up there? It's like, these people don't need to be involved with telling anybody what to do with anything. I tell people, they're not good with money. Don't give them any. But here's the problem. If I asked you for $1,000, you're going to think, well, I had to earn $2,000 to get the $1,000, and it took me a certain amount of weeks to get that money. You know what it takes. You know what sweat and labor goes into earning money. But if you ask a politician for $2,000, or $2 million, or $2 billion, do you think they lay awake at night worrying whether they made a good decision or not? In fact, what happens in Washington is sometimes both sides do this. When Democrats are in control, guess who gets the money? They're big donors. Do you remember Solyndra? They gave $500 million loan to one of the richest men in our country. Why would the government be giving loans to rich people? The government does a lot of dumb things. But the thing is that even if you said, well, government's going to try to get its money back. We're going to send it to Washington, and we have some poverty in Spokane, and the government's going to come and help us with poverty and joblessness. They've been trying it for 70 years. It doesn't work. Look at the municipalities that spend the most per pupil in education. They have the worst education. Washington, D.C., Baltimore. Look at the war on poverty that has poured billions of dollars into our city, and you can't see where it's done anything. In Baltimore, black men between the ages of 20 and 25 have 37% unemployment. You don't want these people, you don't want the federal government involved in these things because they can't fix it. And here's the problem. If you send your money to Washington and they send it back to Spokane, then somebody's got to decide who to give it to. So then someone says, well, John Smith over there would be good at starting a business. We'll give him $1 million to renovate part of Spokane. The problem is we don't know whether John Smith's any good with doing anything with business. He was probably selected because he was a bundler for a certain candidate that won. This is crony capitalism. Unfortunately, we get some of it on the Republican side as well. Both sides have done this. In fact, I would say that the debt problem that most of us who came out of the Tea Party are alarmed about, borrowing $1 million a minute, that the parties are almost equally to blame for it. The Democrats probably spend it and borrow it faster. President Obama is going to accumulate more debt than all 43 presidents combined. But when I started thinking about running for office in 2009, I thought about running for office because I was upset with Republicans. I was upset with fake conservatives. I was upset with Republicans who said, we're going to be conservative, and we got the White House, and what did we do? We doubled the debt. Many Republicans voted to bail out the banks. So really, we have to decide how we're going to fix this, and you're going to have to decide, is it worth working for a Republican candidate or a nominee, and then say, are they really going to change anything, or are they going to preside over the next doubling and tripling of the debt? And here's the dirty little secret of Washington. Nobody likes to talk about it. And when I talk about it, some say, oh, you're being too critical, but it's the truth. There is an unholy alliance. There are people in our party who want unlimited spending for the military. But there are people on the Democrat side who want unlimited spending for social welfare. You know what happens? They get together and everything goes up. Now, I do think national defense is the most important thing we do in Washington. There is no greater priority. And I'll do whatever it takes. But it doesn't mean a blank check. It doesn't mean every weapon system is good for the country. It means we live within our means. It means we spend what we have. Some people are big on saying, well, we need to project strength around the world. You don't project strength from bankruptcy court. If you are going to borrow money from China and send it to Pakistan, that is not projecting strength. So I've said over and over, and I've put forward bill after bill to say, you know what? If we want to have one precept, one thing for which we are going to base our foreign policy on, why don't we not send money to our enemies? Not send money to people who hate us, people who are burning our flag, people who hate Christians. You know what they say? When I try to stop it, they say, oh, we're sending it to the moderates in that country. And I say, it doesn't seem to be working. We have sent billions of dollars to Pakistan. And yet Pakistan has a woman by the name of Asia Bibi who's a Christian. There aren't many Christians left. Most Christians have fled Pakistan, Afghanistan, the Middle East. There was only a few there, but most have fled. Asia Bibi went one day to draw water from the well. And as she did, in a predominantly Muslim village, the women began beating her with sticks. They began stoning her. She would have died. She was crying out for help, and she was bleeding on the ground as they were beating her with sticks and stoning her. And at that moment, the police arrived, and she said, thank goodness I'm saved. And they arrested her. Why? Because the other women said, she's been criticizing the state religion. And all of you know what the state religion is. So I introduced an amendment in the Foreign Relations. I said, we shouldn't send one penny to countries that persecute Christians. None. Zero. We put that on the radio in Spokane. We had a poll, and we asked everybody, Republican and Democrat, do you think we've got enough money to send your money to countries that persecute Christians? What do you think the vote would be? Almost nobody would be for that. So I put it to a vote on some kind of water bill they were working on for 7 years, and they got mad at me, but I forced them to vote because they call it a division of the House. What's that about? Making people stand on principle. We don't have the votes to defund Planned Parenthood, but by golly, I'm going to make them vote. I'm going to make them vote until we get rid of those who are funding this horrendous practice. So in the Foreign Relations Committee, I put forward an amendment that said, no money, not one penny to countries that persecute Christians. You say, well, how do you define persecution? Well, it's actually pretty easy. Any country that has a law that puts Christians to death, or any minority religion to death, for criticizing the state religion. They call it blasphemy. Changing your faith. They call that apostasy if a Muslim becomes a Christian. And the third one, which is interfaith marriage. Many countries have death penalty for all three. So Asia Bibi, who was being beaten to death and stoned, she's been 5 years on death row in Pakistan. So we put forward the amendment, and I guarantee all of Spokane, all of America, Republican and Democrat, would vote with me. You know what the vote was? 18-2 to continue sending money to all of these countries. We don't even have enough money to take care of the problems we've got in our country, and we're sending money to countries that hate us and that hate Christianity. It is actually repulsive. You know what you should do? Kick them all out. Bring them all home. Start over. I would have term limits. I would limit all their terms. Bring them back home. The vote in the Foreign Relations Committee was 18-2 to continue this. Every Democrat and almost every Republican. I tried to cut off the aid to the Muslim Brotherhood when they took over Egypt. I wouldn't fund any of these people today. We're borrowing money from China to send it to them anyway. But why would we fund people who hate us? You know how many people voted with me on that? 22 out of 100. They were all Republican, but that means I got a little bit less than half of the Republicans. You need to know which Republicans are for ending this aid to our enemies and which are going to continue it. And you know what they always argue? They say, oh, it won't balance the budget, it's not enough money. Got to start somewhere. They say that about everything. We've got to cut spending, and they say, oh, it won't balance the budget. Well, yeah, multiply by about 1,000 other things I want to cut, and then we will balance the budget. I think the most important thing we do in the federal government is defend the country. Spokane cannot defend the country. You're an important part of it, but you can't defend the country. We have to have a national defense. The Constitution calls for it. It is constitutional. Doesn't mean a blank check. We probably need to not only audit the Fed, we need to audit the Pentagon as well. But if you give me priorities and tell me what are you going to spend the money on if you're in charge, it will be defending the country. That is a priority. Without a doubt, we need to be strong. Strong enough to repel any attack, strong enough to deter attacks. Reagan believed in a strong military, but he also believed in peace through strength. If you look at him, people mischaracterize who Reagan was all the time. He wasn't overly eager to have big land wars. I guarantee you, if Ronald Reagan were here today, he wouldn't be jumping up and down like some of these people saying, we need to send 500,000 troops back into the Middle East. He said that the Middle East was a confusing place where they've been fighting for thousands of years, and he chose actually to stay out of some of the wars of the Middle East. But you know the thing is, what ISIS is doing is horrific. Chopping off the heads of Christians, chopping off the heads of innocent people, aid workers, the best people we have among us that have the ability and will have the guts to go over there and try to give to these people, cutting their heads off. But you know what? If you want to defeat ISIS, listen to what I said in the debate. First, let's stop arming them. For goodness sake. They ride around in $1 billion worth of Humvees. You'd think we could learn how to make Humvees that have a code before you could turn them on? Or maybe have a GPS located in them so we can bomb the crap out of anybody that steals it. They ride around in $1 billion worth of our Humvees. You know how they pay their soldiers? With $1 billion of U.S. cash we left behind. They have anti-tank weapons. They have tanks. All of what we left behind. Where did they get it? Well, some of it they got from the Shiite government. Do you know who the Shiite government is? They're in Baghdad. They're our allies. But you know who their closer ally is? Iran. The Shiite government, whom we've given trillions of dollars worth, we toppled Hussein, who was also not a great guy. But at the same time, Hussein did protect Christians in Iraq. And you know who he hated? Iran. He fought for 8 years against Iran. He was a counterbalance to Iran. He's gone now, Iraq is essentially a vassal state. They are a subjectatory state to Iran. So people say, we got to do something about Iran. Well, we're funding the allies of Iran. Iran now has armies in Iraq fighting against ISIS. We have given trillions of dollars to the Shiites. But do you think the Shiites can take and hold Mosul? Mosul is a city of 1.5 million. It's 90% Sunnis. ISIS is in the Sunni cities, somewhat welcomed, somewhat fought against, but now you have Shiites fighting to retake Sunni cities. You won't get rid of ISIS until Sunnis fight. So when people say, yes, we need boots on the ground, yes, we will need boots on the ground, and I want to see Arab boots on the ground. Frankly, I'd like to see 10,000 Saudi Arabians marching in at the head of every brigade. Who attacked us on 9/11? Saudi Arabians, 16 out of 19 of them. Who gave the weapons to the radical Islamists in the Syrian war? Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and somewhat us. I voted against this. They said, oh, we're going to arm the moderates, the moderate Islamic rebels. There's 1,500 different groups opposed to Assad in Syria. None of them are moderate. None of them like us. None of them would recognize Israel. They all hate us. And yet we gave them weapons. So I raised my hand and I asked questions. The ambassador, our former ambassador, said, it is inevitable that the people we are giving arms to will fight alongside Al-Qaeda. And I said, hold on. I thought Al-Qaeda was our enemy. We are going to be funding the allies of Al-Qaeda who will fight alongside Al-Qaeda? So they say, oh, well, no, but we're only going to give them to the moderates. So that would be thinking that we maybe understand enough Arabic to determine truth from those who are lying to us. But one CIA analyst put it this way. He said the only thing moderate about them is their ability to fight. So it hasn't been working for 4 or 5 years. So you know what President Obama decided to do? We will train these fighters. And so he said, we're going to train thousands of them. So it's been a year or so now. We allocated $500 million to train these fighters, the moderates. We've trained 60 of them. It cost you $250 million, so a little bit more than $4 million a fighter. So they announced that 60 of them are ready. Some genius decided to send 5 of them. All right, I'm not some kind of military general, but 5? They were captured in 10 minutes by Al-Nusra, which is just another radical jihadist group that's a little bit different than Al-Qaeda, but people who don't like us and don't like Israel, captured in 5 minutes, $250 million. Now, there are people over there who hate ISIS, like stability, want to have their own country, want to have a region, and do like us, the Kurds. So instead of sending weapons to the allies of Iran, the Baghdad government, which we've been doing for 10 years and hasn't worked, why don't we send some of the $7 billion in weapons that is rotting in Afghanistan, why don't we drop it off in Kurdistan and let them fight? They will fight. They'll fight to the death for this because it's their land. The one thing about war is if the people who live there don't care enough to fight, you can't care enough for them. We can't be the policeman of the world. We can't fight everybody. And frankly, it's about time for distinctions. If you want war again in the Middle East, if you want your sons and daughters to go back to the Middle East, I'm not your guy. I'm not sending 500,000 troops back into the Middle East. If you want your sons and daughters in the Middle East, there will always be a Bush or a Clinton for you. Either one of them, they're interchangeable, and they will have us back at war in the Middle East.
Right.
I will fight when necessary. We won't fight with one hand behind our back. We will fight to eliminate our enemies, and then we will come home. Our Founding Fathers gave us something so that people who were eager for war, people who were reckless or rash so they wouldn't carry the day, they made it difficult to initiate war. They said that the president doesn't initiate war. So even if I decided that it was time, that we had to do something, that we had to repel invasion, that we had to go to war, I would first go to Congress, because the power to declare war is in Congress alone. If we are going to win again, we have to figure out how to get a Republican that can win Washington State. It's been a while since we won Washington State for a Republican nomination, for a Republican to win Washington State. To win, there's a couple questions. You have the party bosses, you know who they are. They say we just need to dilute what we stand for. We need to become Democrat-like, and then we can win again. Anybody want that? No! I say it's completely the opposite. I say we should be more boldly for what we are for. Yeah. Why not be the party that owns tax cuts? That just means we leave more money in Spokane. But it also means we leave more money on the south side of Chicago. It means we leave more money in Detroit. We can take the idea of tax cuts and limited government to places no Republican has ever gone. I've been there. I was on the south side of Chicago a month ago with an African-American minister who's changed his registration to be a Republican. He has a private school. The government, he's given up on the government teaching his kids. He's taken it over, and he's going to teach his kids. You ask him about poverty programs, and he'll tell you, the Chicago machine steals it all. We never see it anyway. The unions and the government and all of this, once upon a time, were set up to exclude blacks and exclude African Americans. They were an exclusionary thing. Now they are just an area, particularly the government unions in the cities, they're an area to give out largesse to your friends. So it's cronyism. That's who gets the money. But that's why we continue to have poverty and joblessness and despair. The drug problem in our country, it's a problem. It's a big problem. But you know what's made it worse and made it utter despair for those who live in poverty? Is the people who go to jail in our country are poor. Rich kids don't go to jail. Rich kids who used cocaine in the 80s and 90s got a good lawyer and got out. Black kid in the south side of Chicago used crack cocaine, got 15 years. Sometimes life. There was a nurse out west. Her name was Jill Lockwood, and she was convicted of Lortab, which is mostly Tylenol, but it has hydroxycodone in it. It's a narcotic. She had like 60 pills, and she did something illegal. She probably should be punished. She forged the doctor's signature to get these pills. She was an addict. She got 15 years in prison because we add up the whole weight, and we count the Tylenol. The Tylenol is legal and isn't addictive, but we count that also. So we've just gone too far in this, and it's extraordinarily expensive. And you know what happens? If you take some of these nonviolent drug people out of jail, they still are a problem. They still need help, and we need to get them off of drugs. But the thing is, you take them out of jail, guess what? Your jails have plenty of room for violent criminals in. Everybody laments jobs going overseas. They say, my job went overseas, my company's going overseas, and there's some truth to that. But you know what? You want your jobs to stay here? There's a 70,000-page tax code. It's chasing companies overseas. It's chasing jobs overseas. You want your job to stay here? Let's get rid of the whole tax code and start it. I'd get rid of the IRS, and I'd have a one-page tax return. You fill it out, and one rate for everybody. Everybody pays. Chris Wallace challenged me on Sunday News a couple weeks ago, and he said, well, wouldn't the government be short over $2 trillion? I said, precisely. Starve the beast. Don't give it any money. The question should be, where is the money? Is the money going to be in Spokane or in Washington? It isn't a matter of government needs it. Government needs to be told that we want them smaller, but we want the private economy bigger. That's where jobs are created. But if we want to win Washington, the way we're going to win Washington is to have a Republican nominee who believes in the entire Bill of Rights. It's not just the Second Amendment. We're pretty good on the Second Amendment. And if you think I don't believe in the Second Amendment, come into my house unannounced. But to defend the Second Amendment, you got to believe in the Fourth Amendment. If the government can come in your house without a warrant because they think you're part of a suspicious group like maybe the Constitution Party, maybe you're a libertarian, maybe you believe in the Constitution, or maybe you're an evangelical Christian, or maybe you're a heretic and say, my kids are my business and not yours, and I'm going to teach my kids at home. The people who want you to give up your rights, they want to make you feel like you're a bad person. They say, well, if you have nothing to fear, you have nothing to hide. As if your privacy is all about doing bad things. Well, your privacy can be because you want to be left alone to practice your religion the way you believe in your religion. It means that you want to teach your kids what you want to teach your kids. Could mean the opposite too, though. Could mean you're an atheist and you don't believe in God. But the thing is, you can be a minority for any of a variety of reasons. People say, oh, we're not the party for minority rights. The heck we aren't. We are the party of minority rights. We were the party of emancipation. We're the party of civil rights. And we should continue to be the party of justice for everyone. We have to defend the entire Bill of Rights. The First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, they help to protect the Second Amendment. The Fifth and Sixth Amendment, I say these are the Justice Amendments. The Fifth Amendment says your property can't be taken from you without due process or without just compensation. Does anybody remember the Kelo case? Kelo was the case where the Supreme Court wrongly decided that we can take property from one private property owner who maybe doesn't pay much in taxes and give it to another private property owner because they'll pay more in taxes. A big corporation typically. Let's say like a casino in Atlantic City. Vera Koking had lived in her house for 30 years. A certain casino magnate with orange hair who's running for president. I don't want to get any more specific than that. He decided he wanted her house. So he sent the government to take it from her. We have to be very wary that someone who speaks in strong words, who sounds like he might be one of us who wants to beat up the establishment, you got to be very careful to understand and discover whether they truly are a conservative or whether maybe they're an authoritarian. The same concept of Kelo has been used in California, like a lot of other bad things that start in California. They've used it in California with municipalities to take lands from a church, because the church doesn't pay any taxes, and give it to a retailer who pays more taxes. It's been fought in court, and they haven't been successful. But if the concept of private property, if the concept of your property rights are whether or not are relative, and whether or not how much you pay in taxes, and that the government can take it and give it to somebody they think will pay more in taxes, that's not the concept of private property that I believe in. If I'm president, there'll be no instance of anyone having their property ever taken and given to another private property owner. We also do this through something else that's really bad. It's called civil asset forfeiture. This often happens to poor people, disproportionately poor people, and disproportionately minorities. You are stopped. Sometimes for driving in a neighborhood, they say, why are you driving so slow in that neighborhood? And sometimes they'll say, they won't say this, but why are you black driving in that neighborhood? It's an understated thing. It's not really a purposeful thing. But they say, do you have any money? And you say, well, I've got $1,000. I'm going to the dentist. And you know what they say? Give it to me. And you say, why? What are you charging me with? They say, just give it to me. And that's what happens. And then they will negotiate with you on the side of the road or at the police station. They will say, you know what, if you don't sue us to get it back, we'll give you half now. This is called civil asset forfeiture, and you do not have to be convicted to have your money taken from you. So I have a bill that says, that's not the America I understand. The America I understand is innocent until proven guilty. The Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a trial by jury. Probably no more important right. The right to a trial by jury. Surely no one could oppose that. In 2011, after I just arrived in the Senate, they put forward something called indefinite detention. An American citizen can now be detained indefinitely, without a trial, without a lawyer, maybe without a charge. So we were having this debate on the Senate floor with another Republican senator, and I don't like to get too specific, but he was from Arizona. And I looked at him aghast and I said, do you mean an American citizen could be taken and sent to Guantanamo Bay and kept there forever without a trial? He said, yes, they're dangerous. I said, sort of begs the question, doesn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not dangerous? And look at some of the things they're putting out there to describe who might be a terrorist, who might be dangerous, who you might want to report. There was a list put out by the Department of Justice that said people missing fingers. I've met quite a few farmers missing fingers who weren't terrorists. Stains on the clothing. I think they're implying bomb making, but it could be you spilled your coffee on the way to work, which has happened to me before. People who like to pay in cash. People who have lots of guns in their house. I'm not going to ask for anybody to raise hands. But the thing is, if those are the characteristics of a terrorist, and they might be, but if those are the general characteristics we're going on, certainly wouldn't you want your day in court before they come to get you? The right to be innocent until proven guilty, the right to have an attorney, the right to a trial by jury, my goodness, this is what we send our soldiers to fight for. I know a young man who lost both legs and an arm, and I asked him, what did you fight for? And he said, I fought for the Bill of Rights. I fought for the Constitution. Wouldn't it be so sad? Wouldn't it be just so utterly sad if when he gets back, he finds that we gave up the Bill of Rights? These young men and women sacrificed so much. We're going to say we gave up on the Bill of Rights while they were gone. It just amazes me and flabbergasts me that we would be so petty and so, so frivolous with our freedom to let it just slip away from us. When I think about someone being detained without a trial, my first thought that came to my mind when I was having this debate was Richard Jewell. Everybody said he was an Olympic bomber. This has been about 15 years ago now. Within moments, he was convicted on TV. Everybody said he was guilty. Why? He fit the profile. He wore glasses. I see a few of you out there. He was an introvert. He had a backpack. Must have been him. He had to have been guilty. The media was made to give him millions of dollars back after they ruined his life in the space of a couple of days, but he didn't do it. Think about how important it is to be innocent until proven guilty. Think of what would have happened to Richard Jewell had he been a black man in the South in 1920. Think if it had been Japanese American in California at the time of the war. That's not what we're about. We are about innocent until proven guilty. We are not about judging people as a group. We're not about letting the government look through all of our stuff and say that we all are suspicious. We're about individualized suspicion. We're about getting a warrant from an independent judge. Do you know what? I'm thoroughly convinced that if we become the party of justice again, if we become the party that defends the Sixth Amendment just as fervently as we defend the Second Amendment, we're going to be the party that wins the day. That's the party I want to be part of, and that's the party I want to be. Thank you very much.
All right, Randy's going to do a book signing out there in about 15 minutes or so, give or take. Right now, we're going to do a real quick drawing. You can be seated again real fast. We're going to do a real quick drawing for a couple silver coins, a book, actually 2 books, and a gold coin as well. Because we believe in sound money, right? All right. And I want to thank especially right now Coins Plus for doing this. And just phenomenal. Coins Plus is always there when we need them. So right now, I'm going to call up Stephanie Cates, the Vice President for the Spokane County Republican Party, and Lacey Crowder, a local activist. All right. This is going to be for one of the silver coins. You ladies get a fight? Okay, there you go. All right. And the winner is Dawn Steele. Dawn, are you here? Yeah. Dawn, perfect. There she is. Give her a round of applause. So come up afterwards and I'll get it to you. All right. And another silver coin. And the winner is Ben Wolkauer, I think. Ben Wolkauer. There you are, Ben. Give a round of applause. The next one is a gorgeous Statue of Liberty silver coin. Lacey, if you would. The winner is, from the bottom, Jeff Baxter. Right on. And for the Gold Eagle, and again, thank you to Coins Plus for doing this, and the Gold Eagle, and the winner is Karen Scoob. Wow, look at that. All right. You can collect the books at the book signing table. There's 2 books here that we're auctioning, or that we're drawing for as well. Randy's going to sign them personally. And again, this is called Taking a Stand. Lacey, if you want to, for the first book. And the winner is Scott McClay, actually. Is he here? Yeah! Woo! We'll meet you at the book signing table. And the last book, Josh McKee. Josh McKee from Atlas. All right, everybody. Again, Randy's going to be signing books out there. Thank you for standing for freedom and liberty. Make sure to sign up and get involved. That's how we're going to take